I want to stay in Europe because I started off the show talking about this idea of these carbon tariffs. We're told Australian steel and aluminium will not be exempt from the EU's planned carbon border levies, arguing that the carbon tariffs will support Australia's green hydrogen and rare earths industries. EU says Australia must lift its emissions reductions goals as part of any EU free trade agreement with this country. And this is, well, I'd call it protectionism, but it's economic coercion. It's very much what China is doing. Different objective, I know, between the two, but Australian voters have said what they've said in election after election on the issue of a domestic carbon tax. But this is won by stealth if we want to trade with the EU, isn't it, Greg?
It sure is, Peter. Look, you know, to speak very bluntly, the European Union is essentially the work of the devil. Its operating procedure is this. It ties itself up in ludicrous regulatory knots and imposes grotesque cost disadvantages on itself. It then tries to export those cost disadvantages through the treaty system and multilateralise them. Now, of course, the nations of Asia simply don't pay any attention to this rubbish at all. And the European Union won't impose these on a nation like China because it'll get a developing country exemption. Meanwhile, Australia, despite our record population growth, has actually reduced our emissions by substantially more per capita than the OECD average. But we don't have this European rhetoric. Now, nobody is going to get to zero emissions by 2050. This is a fantasy target. But the Europeans will punish us for not having their rhetoric. And in the meantime, the countries with which we compete most heavily geostrategically, like China, will not impose any of these absurd costs on themselves. And even countries we like, Indonesia and India and so on, are going hell for leather creating coal-fired power stations at a great rate of knots, and they won't suffer any disadvantage either. But the European Union, which shows zero strategic solidarity with Australia on matters of geostrategic interests, democratic values, anything else, is going to punish Australia for not living up to the EU and its record of woeful platitudes and underperformance.
All right, you couldn't have said it better or more strongly than that, Greg Sheridan. Thank you as always.
Thanks so much, Peter.